All right. So, welcome back to, I guess this isn't really an episode of the podcast per se, but I wanted to talk about Hige Soru. I also just wanted to make a video because I wanted to use this new setup for something. Oh god, I should have brought my water. It's over there. Anyways, I wanted to talk about Hige Soru because it's been a while since we talked about Hige Soru, and that show has brought up a couple of interesting things. One thing that I probably will actually get out the way first. I'll talk about it in a second. But yeah, regarding the podcast, I still plan on doing it. Frequency is something I'm going to have to figure out because I start working on the 14th of June. So, and then alongside that, there are other things that I wish to do regarding content. So, scripted videos are something that I've always had I've always liked doing or liked seeing the final product of, even though the scripting of them is not necessarily all that great and enjoyable, but I do feel as if there's a video that I owe to get out to people that I know by hopefully August, September. But that's off topic. We'll go ahead and get to the to Hige Soru. So the first issue I wanted to bring up was one that I actually don't have in my notes, I believe. What the hell it was? Maybe it'll come back to me as we keep recording this video. I'm not sure. But anyways, we'll go to another issue. There's some of the other stuff that I wanted to talk about. So one thing I wanted to talk about with Hige Soru, right, is if you looked on mal discussion boards or threads, anything regarding discussion of this show when it first started airing, one of the things that was brought up was how illogical or irrational it was for Sayu to run away from home, seemingly with no money, no plan, no clothes, no nothing, from Hokkaido, which is, if you're not aware of Japan's geography, Hokkaido is one of Japan's 4 islands. It's the far northest one. And she goes to Tokyo, which is midway on the eastern border of Honshu, which is like the middle island. So, I mean, that's a very far distance. If you're not aware, that's really fucking far. But people thought that this was just flat out irrational. And it was the irrationality that was believed to have been a criticism. And I never understood this. Because I have always been of the mindset that things being irrational does not mean that it is necessarily a problem per se. There's such a thing as justified irrationality, or in literature, I guess it's more like sometimes irrationality isn't of itself, it is rational, right? We'll go ahead and get into a little bit more regarding this. So, in particular, it's very logical for people to be irrational in situations that are either, one, heavily garnered by emotion, or two, in which they are just not mature enough to handle the situation. We have a case of the second one here, right? Where Sayu is 17, she's a 17-year-old girl. As we learned through this episode, spoiler alert, you have like 3 seconds to like click before I like move on and start spoiling. 3, 2, 1. Okay. So, Sayu's backstory gets revealed, and it turns out that her friend actually committed suicide, largely as a result of Sayu as being the recipient of bullying that Sayu probably should have received, or that Sayu indirectly incited. And yeah, it was her mother then blaming that and questioning whether Sayu was the person responsible for her friend's suicide was what pushed Sayu to actually leave the house, right? So, I don't think that it's at all irrational to think that you need distance from your mother. It's even the brother, Sayu's brother, even reflects this when he actually gives her 300,000 yen, which I'll talk about in a second, to leave the house and not have to deal with the trauma and not have to deal with the broken relationship it seemed like she had with her mother and things of the sort. So there's such a thing as what is irrational being irrational. Is the acting out of the emotion irrational because she's obviously going to have a harder life, she's not going to be able to go to school, she's stopping her progression through life, and blah blah blah, etc. Yes, technically it is irrational for her to run away from the house, but there is such a thing as it being rational for her to feel as if she needs to do things that are irrational, right? All right. maybe I was a little long-winded into getting into that point. But it's just, it seems like the anime community in particular has a really hard time grasping, and it's not the entire anime community, it's specifically critics that always have a hard time grasping that there's such a thing as being a human. I feel like the human element gets removed when a lot of critics do any sort of criticizing or analysis, and that's something you can't necessarily remove, because a lot of what is written by authors kind of takes that into account. Like, you have what's being reflected here via Sayu is like probably what 90%, I don't even know if 90% is even, that's probably an over exaggeration. It is not unbelievable to think that somebody in Sayu's position who's a 17-year-old girl would probably run away from home and act illogically in this situation. And when you dismiss the human element, right, that humans are indeed fucking irrational, you then start to think that this is stupid, and then you criticize it for, you criticize something that's not really inherently an issue. Yeah, that was primarily what I wanted to say there. And what's even funnier is that the show eventually comes to justifying the irrationality by making it just seem more rational, right? That being obviously the outburst of emotions, the verbal abuse and the psychological abuse inflicted by Sayu's mom, etc., etc. Regarding the 300,000 yen, 300,000 yen, I haven't done the exact conversion. I believe it is somewhere in the range of $2,900. People thought that this was an issue, particularly that if she was given money by her brother, how did she run out of it so fast? Hey, newsflash, if you're running away from home and you have to find places to live, $2,900 over the course, like, it's not going to last you very long. You gotta, her brother was intending her to use the $2,900 to stay at a hotel, but I mean, like, she didn't even do that. Well, actually she did. She did stay at a hotel, and then it ran out, and so she got forced to either go back home, but obviously she's still grieving and depressed, so that's not really an option when you're emotionally unstable, or not in her position of being emotionally unstable, which only left her with the option of finding stay via other means. She realized that she could start using her body for sex after another guy had already coerced, maybe that's a proper word, coerced her into having sexual acts and whatnot. So it's not unbelievable to think that 300,000 yen just kind of snapped and disappeared like that. I mean, it's, I don't understand why that was a criticism to begin with, because if you're running away from home, right, and you're bringing no belongings and things of the sort, I guess, yeah, okay. Before I get to that point, I guess I need to clarify. People also had suggested that it didn't make any sense that Sayu had ran out of money so quickly because she could have just gotten a job to be able to sustain herself instead of selling her body. To which my response was, one, if she's running away from home with virtually no belongings, no clothes, etc., etc., what makes you think that she had any sort of plan or was planning for this to be permanent? Clearly, this was not her attempting to permanently run away. She had it was undecided when, it was to be determined when she was going to return to her house, but it wasn't a permanent move, right? It never was planned to be a permanent move. So I just don't understand why there's a criticism about the way in which she went about making her living, right? If that makes sense, or being able to support herself. I don't think if you morally have an issue with it, that's one thing, but to criticize the show as if it's being illogical for making this character take this method of supporting themselves is not fair, because it's entirely logical. It makes sense, and even if it weren't even if it were irrational, there's a chance that it could be rationally irrational. But we'll go on. One thing I dislike about this show, because I've been defending it for these past like 10 minutes or so, is I hate Mishima. I don't like Mishima, and I also don't necessarily like Goto, but I have far less issues with Goto than I do Mishima. Mishima as a character just feels as if she is constantly projecting what she believes to be people's issues onto them. And my problem is that when she does it, there's typically like two issues. One, they're wrong. Like the projections are just absolutely fucking incorrect. And two, there's just the chance that, or it's not the chance. 9 times out of 10, Mishima is saying something that is so devoid of nuance despite how verbose it is, right? She will just keep speaking and ranting and going on and on and on about something that either isn't even true or is not even the full picture. So my example of this was the karaoke scene in what I believe was episode 8. For context, Mishima runs into Sayu at like outside of a movie or a convenience store or something like that. I don't remember where it was, but Mishima realizes that Sayu is running away from some guy, so they go to a karaoke place and she helps her hide. And when she's in there, they have a discussion where Mishima basically just lectures her, and she's like, oh, you need to figure out what the hell you want to do because your time's coming up, which is true. But then she goes and detours the conversation into something like, you're in love with Yoshida and you need to figure out what your relationship with him is and blah 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 blah, which is not the crux of the issue with Sayu. The crux of the issue with Sayu is being able to get over the grief, number one, of losing her friend, largely indirectly due to her doings, right? And Yoshida is just like a side point. It's just a method to help her get there and to realize that she actually has worth. She's lost her feeling of worth. That's what Yoshida is helping to reinforce. So I just don't, I can't stand Mishima because that is a case of where she's entirely mischaracterizing the issue, and not one where she's just necessarily missing nuance of the situation. But it's like, another thing that I can't stand is that the projection most of the time that she does, it would be one thing if she was projecting these feelings that she believes, or these things that she believes other people are having, that other characters are having, onto these characters, and she's telling them because she genuinely feels like she's doing a good thing. That's one thing. But everything about the way that she goes about this, every time she projects, it feels as if she is doing it so inauthentically and so ingenuinely. And I can't stand it because it's framed as if she's saying something that's so revelatory, or is like some sort of epiphany or something along those lines. And it's just not, right? For example, the conversation that Mishima has with Goto, which I believe is not episode 8, might be episode 7, but it might actually be episode, I don't remember. There's a conversation that Mishima has with Goto, and they are discussing Goto's relationship with Yoshida, pretty much. And Mishima brings up, she just starts monologuing and screaming, and she's just like, oh, Goto, you don't want to fucking commit, and you're so scared of the future, and what if he says no, and blah 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 blah. And not only is it just missing nuance on the situation, this is a discussion we've already had in the show, so it's not saying anything that's revelatory. I know that Goto has like this look of shock on her fucking face, like, oh my god, how did she know her? Wow, she found my darkest secret. But it's like, we already knew this was your issue. And this fundamentally, I guess, is my issue with Mishima, is that she feels like a plot device, but she's not actually doing her job. She feels like a plot device in the sense that her job clearly here is to scream at the audience what the issue of all of the characters are, and then the characters should theoretically then go about their character study arc, or their coming of age, their development, etc. And inherently, what the problem with this is that Mishima never is inciting something, or is never inciting some sort of useful development. The things that she's attempting to incite, I guess is what I want to say, don't actually become actualized. And so she's just screaming at the audience things that the audience already can conclude or knows, or she's just mischaracterizing situations. And it's annoying afterwards because she cries and bitches and moans when she doesn't get her way. I can't stand this damn character. I feel like the show would be better if she simply was omitted. But I understand why she's there. It just doesn't work because she's a shitty plot device. Last thing I want to talk about, that other thing that I wanted to talk about. I know what it was. Okay. So let me go ahead and get to this other thing, right? So other thing that I wanted to talk about, which I did not talk about previously. It's probably late to talk about this, but I want to say this anyways. I very much appreciate the direction that the show has gone in characterizing Yoshida as somebody who is not neither praising him nor criticizing him too heavily for taking in Sayu. I praise them not, or I'm happy that they didn't praise him in the sense that it seemed as if at one point the show was almost happy and praising him for not committing statutory rape. Like, a little confusing. But it stopped doing that. It just focused on the relationship between Yoshida and Sayu and helping both of them develop together. They started to develop and discover themselves alongside each other without it turning sexual, which I hope it kind of stays that way because it would be statutory rape if it wasn't otherwise. But I also appreciate that they didn't criticize Yoshida too heavily because it would have been... There was a scene, I believe, was episode 6, where Yoshida and this guy that Sayu had previously slept with met outside of Yoshida's house, and the guy was basically trying to tell Yoshida that he was only doing this for himself and blah, 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 etc. And that he was selfish in going about it in the way in which he did. To which Yoshida responds, okay, if I'm selfish, then why didn't any of you fucking do it? Like, if I'm doing this for myself, then, like, what's the problem with wanting to help somebody? Why do I have to come off, why do I have to be characterized as self-righteous because I want to help somebody? And I thought that was a perfect response, and the show seemed to have backed him on it because it stopped criticizing him for it. And I thought that was very well handled. Yeah, those were the main 2 points. I'm just very happy in the direction that the show went in regards to Yoshida, and neither praising him for doing what he's done, nor criticizing him very, very heavily, because it's not as if like he's doing something that I think most people would agree that what he's doing ethically is probably correct. Finally, this is just something small about this most recent episode. This has been episode 9. I was okay with the directing of the scene regarding Sayu's friend committing suicide. However, I do think it probably could have been handled better. In particular, I thought that the directing was sort of weak. I thought the storyboarding was sort of weak. It just kind of is. There are shots that portray characters, but there's no, I guess, nuance and distance of characters in the shots. There's no nuance necessarily in color. I guess the scenes did the blue in particular feels a little more heavy, if that makes sense, a little darker in tone, a little more saturated, things of the sort. But generally speaking, I thought the scene just kind of looked flat, and it was a little derpy animation wise. There's a part where Sayu is like hanging over the edge of a gate after her friend has jumped off, and her face is just like fucking derped out for a second, and I don't know if anybody ever noticed that. It ends up getting fixed like a couple of frames afterwards. It's only noticeable because it's a still. It's not like it's in motion. If it was in motion, I wouldn't have cared. But yeah, I just thought the directing in that scene was kind of weak. Storyboarding was a little bit weak there, and I think one thing that I wish that this show did, that sometimes it does do, but did not do in this particular case, was sometimes I wish Hige or Soru just went further. Some of you probably remember when Digibro did a video on... What the hell is the name of that show? Scum's Wish. That's the name of the show. I can't remember the Japanese name. Anyways. Scum's Wish, right? Digibro did a video on Scum's Wish, and he was just like, Scum's Wish never goes far enough, right? I don't agree with that. I think that show was great. But I have the same sentiment with this show. Sometimes I feel like Hige or Soru just does not go far enough with how dark, seemingly an adult-oriented its subject matter is. I think this issue of suicide and bullying probably could have been a lot more graphic. And I think it would have been good to have it that way, because I think that better not necessarily, well, I think number one, it better gets across how devastating the bullying is, right? It's one thing to just look at the bullying happening and going like, oh yeah, this is unfair, this is unjust, blah, 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 etc. It's another thing to see the result in carnage in a sense of the bullying. I'm not saying they needed to show some dismantled, decrepit corpse on the ground or something like that. What I am saying is that it wouldn't have hurt if they had like some like censored image of her friend on the ground, maybe like a shot that's like has her head maybe like in the background and it's like really blurred out and censored, and just a puddle of blood and broken glasses, like, you know, towards like the foreground or something like that. Maybe I could draw it, maybe I can't, I don't know. I'm trying to put an image in your head. Point being, I think there's such a thing as not going far enough, and I don't think Hige or Soru went far enough on that suicide scene for it to necessarily be as impactful, I think, as it really could have been. Because I think this is really this could have been a good time to talk about bullying in Japanese high schools and things of the sorts, because that is a big issue. But it just seems as if the show didn't go about tackling it very well, or didn't want to tackle it all that much. And that kind of disappointed me, but it's okay. It's all right. So overall, I like Hige or Soru. I'm still very much enjoying it. I think it's a solid show. I don't know if I'd say it's a good show per se. If you have not watched Hige or Soru, you probably shouldn't have listened. Well, actually, you know what? If you've not watched Hige or Soru and you heard all my spoilers, I would still probably recommend it to you. One thing about shows like this is that, like, when you have shows that are just clearly character studies, a lot of what are spoilers aren't necessarily spoilers, right? So in particular, Goto, if you had known Goto actually didn't have this boyfriend that she fabricated having been dating for 5 years, or you knew about Sayu's backstory with her friend committing suicide and things of the sort, I don't think it ruins the experience for you, to be completely honest, because ultimately the crux of the experience is watching the characters get out of their decrepit states. It's not necessarily knowing what the decrepit states are, or knowing what the backbone and the background of these states are, or what these issues are in particular. So yeah, generally speaking, I would still recommend the show. I probably will do another video within the next couple of weeks. If this were a podcast, this would be a very long segment, which is why I'm segmenting this into its own video, because I had a lot that I wanted to talk about. I might do another video like this, but with Mars Red. There's a lot to talk about with Mars Red, and I feel like if I want to do something with that, I probably need to do a little bit more research into some of the thoughts, processes in that particular era of Japanese history regarding, I forget what it's called, but it's basically the idea that what is best for Japan is best for all of Asia. I think it was called Pan-Asianism. But I want to do a little bit more research on that before I get to other things that are discussed in Mars Red. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you guys did enjoy, please leave a like, comment. I got another video coming soon, more than likely, because I like this setup so much. And I like staring at the camera with and seeing myself over on the right with all these albums behind me. It feels really great. It feels nice. So yeah, I'll see you guys later. Deuce. I don't know what this was. Deuce. Shout outs to my nigga, bro. Kyoryo, you know what it is. Yes, sir. Now I go watch the parade. The lake is never slow. Way by the waterside floor. I gave you all my heart, I fulfill God's obligation, but you didn't fulfill yours. I'm drowning in the voices. Keep your plans tight.